out there who are listening or seeing this podcast. Today we have Caroline Hegarty with us, and it's so nice to meet you and welcome to this podcast.
Thank you for having me.
And you were telling me that you are originally from Ireland and have moved to USA. So that is a great jump. How long time have you been in USA?
I've been here for 30 years, long time, so almost half my life.
Okay.
Yeah, and it was a big cultural change. You know, I loved growing up in Ireland. It's where I fell in love with horses, and I had some great times riding around the countryside there at a time when there was less traffic on the roads. And yeah, it sealed my love of horses, and yeah, it never went away.
I know that Ireland is well known for horses, so you maybe have it in your blood.
Maybe.
So please tell us about what you are doing.
Okay, so as a horse owner, you know, I love horses first. That is my passion. I am unapologetic about it. While riding is great, and I do love riding, I am only happy to do it when my horses are telling me that they are empowered to do it, and that I've done and prepared them well enough for that task. And so I grew up in a culture, and I think the culture is probably very similar in a lot of countries where we're very embedded with the idea of the entitlement of owning horses. And we have a very skewed view of how easy it should be, whereas in fact it's not. I found that as I grew older and I started reaching out to professionals to help me with the riding, with the saddle fitting, with the hoof care and my rider posture and developing my skill, I found I was getting a lot of information from them that was asking me to do things when my horses were objecting. I could tell from my horses. If you have any kind of an instinct with horses and you've been around them for a while, you do learn instinctively when they're not happy or when they're showing signs of, okay, I'm not okay with this. A lot of times I was told to ignore it. I was told they have your number. Make them do it, all those things that I think everybody has probably heard if they've come up the ranks of trying to learn how to ride. And I was not willing to accept that. I walked out on lessons. I left clinics because my horses were telling me whatever this person is telling you, I'm not okay with it. So I started an investigation into why was I, who loved my horses, was willing to pay for the right information, was having such a difficult time from what my horses were telling me. So when I started looking at, I guess, the structure or the culture or the whole network of how we go about this process of riding horses, competing horses, or doing what we do with horses, that there is an astonishing lack of education, and there's a whole load of opinions, none of which really unite. Very few people, if you ask 10 people about how to ride a horse, how to fit a saddle, how to shoe horses, you'll probably get 10 different opinions. So I was like, how is anyone supposed to navigate their way through that confusion? So I thought I would look into where this information was coming from. Why do people believe it? And I started off investigating what kind of research and evidence would be there to guide us. I started Equitopia, and I did a lot of research into how can we create global change where there's teamwork, where there's a consensus, and there's some evidence to back it up so that we actually can tell when we're meeting the right professional, or if we need to have a conversation with a professional, that we are learning how we need to communicate with that professional. So, for example, like if you want to have a chat with a farrier, then as owners, for me, I was like, I need to know at minimum hoof anatomy. How does my horse's hoof work? What am I looking for that tells me whether this hoof is being trimmed correctly? Whether are shoes good? Are they bad? Does it depend? How do we shift the focus from basically evaluating whether a horse is comfortable or not? Because that's what we all want. I think we want that picture of when I bring my horse in, I put the saddle on, I get on and I ride. I want to know what that feels like if I've made things okay for my horse. Am I a good owner? Am I a good rider from my horse's perspective? And how do we read that? So what I found with all the research and evidence is there is a lot of conflicting evidence and research. There's good quality research, there's bad quality research, depending on the variables and depending on what they're focusing on. And it's very difficult to compartmentalize those elements of horsemanship because everything is connected. If a horse is indicating through their behavior that there's something wrong, then it could be a bad saddle fit. It could be hoof care. It could be that you're not a straight rider. It could be their teeth. It could be the bridle. It could be any number of things. So that's the kind of tool belt we need to build. And evidence and research has traditionally been really shared amongst those who remain in the academic world. Maybe some of it might reach veterinarians through their curriculum when they're going to school to study to be a vet, but it's still very much clinical from a veterinary perspective. They don't learn or usually look at horses being ridden if there's a lameness issue. They're not taught to understand gait abnormalities when there's a change in gait. They are not educated in anything to do with saddle fit or rider posture or any of those things which are really super, super important. If you have a horse with a problem and the person you call is a veterinarian, then there's a huge gap in knowledge of how to maybe figure out what might be going on. So one of the first educators we reached out to was Dr. Sue Dyson. She's an internationally recognized lameness veterinarian. She has over 406 research papers published, and a lot of her research is actually part of the curriculum where vets learn. But she understood that there was this lack as she started developing her expertise in lameness and looking at how these things all connected. She developed what's called the ridden horse pain ethogram, and she's extracted 24 behaviors that are, it's like there's timing involved, there's frequency and duration that correlate directly with underlying musculoskeletal pain if 8 of these behaviors are present with the constraints that have to be applied. And she's done this in the field, researching horses in competition, looking at them in the warm-up ring and then predicting what's going to happen when they go out and compete. So it's very exciting research, and I think it is something that, you know, I see as being a global foundation for owners, vets, trainers, farriers to be able to have something that's repeatable, that can give them information that no matter what country and no matter what horse, no matter what the horse is doing, that there is something that we can have a basis of discussion about that's defensible and helps us as an industry move forward to better guidelines. So that is one of the most exciting things that's come out of this. And, you know, we see that this information should be known to some degree by owners and equine professionals, no matter where they are.
Yeah, we have been talking about driver license for horse owners. We maybe need that, but we need a lot of new evidences and all these things. There has come up so much new just through the last 20 years, I think. I remember when I was younger, we didn't know what a dentist was to a horse. We have the farrier was coming with his thing and done the horse's teeth, and if they couldn't chew. But today you have specialists to this, and you can see there's so much going on around horses right now.
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, the thing again with the horse world, and this is what I work towards, is you know, there is that feeling of entitlement sometimes that we are entitled to ride them and we have the right to do it. And for me, I think we need to change the culture and shift more towards the responsibility of owning horses, our responsibility to be sufficiently educated and aware to, again, as I say, like we have to evaluate what we are seeing when we look at our horses from a physical, mental, and emotional component. So that involves like, how do they learn? You know, the theory of dominance is again, really deeply embedded in in the horse culture, where you make them do it. It's about pressure. It's very little about, well, where's the horse's voice? How does my horse tell me that the saddle is pinching? How does my horse tell me that his feet are sore? How does my horse tell me that, you know, that the bridle is tight and it's impinging on his pole, or on some of the trigeminal nerve in the face, or all the other things that have a whole body effect for the horse and impacts their performance? If you shut that voice down by continually having the idea that you're just make them do it, or people label things like they're stubborn, they're lazy, they're this, they're that. There's all these labels that get attached that are really just a method for shutting down the horse's voice. And if we don't have that voice, then A, it's not a partnership, it's more of a slave-owner relationship, because the horse doesn't have a voice. There's also this misconstrued idea of safety. Like, I want a bomb-proof horse. I want a horse that I can rely on. And it goes back to like the fundamental thing of, they're not designed to be ridden. It's a very bad idea. There's many reasons why we shouldn't be riding them. A, they're not designed for it. If you look at a horse's back and you look at the makeup of the spine and the dorsal spinous processes, you look at the horse's nature, where they are like designed to, when they're fearful, they will hollow their back. So we put our weight, which could for them instinctually feel like a predator, they're going to hollow their back. There's also the fundamental fight or flight instinct that is literally their survival. Their instinct is, when they're afraid, they run. That's every fiber in their being tells them to run if they're afraid. And we get on and we expect to do something that requires us to ask them to overcome and ignore all those basic instinctual feelings to do what we want them to do. And it's, you know, again, I understand that a lot of people don't think about this because it's not information that is, I guess, normal. People don't talk about these things when you ride horses, because again, we're deeply embedded in our entitlement and our history of expecting that horses are going to do things for us. And so this to me is a whole new evolution. And I think it's since horses are no longer, you know, used for essential things, like in history, they were used for transportation, they were used for agriculture, they were used for war and things that, again, were not pleasant. I'm sure all those horses suffered, and we can look back at it with romantic eyes and everything. But again, if we look at the horses in history, I'm sure they probably didn't have great lives either. Now we're in a situation where it's entertainment, they're more luxury items. And I think we need to redefine that relationship and start asking less, what can my horse do for me, but start asking, what can I do for my horse? We owe these horses a tremendous amount for our civilization, for our mental well-being, for so many reasons. And I find it sad sometimes that there's such a resistance to reshaping this view of what horses do for us. I get very disheartened when I see the sport element, the competitive equestrian sport, where it's all about winning and money and medals, it seems. When I watched the Olympics last August, I was in tears. I was like, how can we be showing this on screens and people think it's great? You know, the blue tongues, the gadgets, the horses being forced into frames. This is not what it should be about. Sorry. And so we need to be critical thinkers. We need to start looking at this in a better way. We have to start defining terms a little bit better. People throw around the word well cared for. And again, what does that mean? This is an opinion of what well cared for is, because it's not defined. Horse welfare is defined. We need to start talking about horse welfare and not well cared for. There's the 5 domains of horse welfare, which have been established by some of the world's leading animal welfare researchers, and we should be talking about this. We are talking about conflict behaviors. What are conflict behaviors? This is the language our horses speak. We should be able to understand what our horses are saying if we love them, because love is not defined by what we think it is. We can say our love, I love my horse. The question is, how does that love feel to your horse? It's not a fact when you say you love your horse. That is your opinion. The question is, what does your horse think of that love? The other thing is again, when we start talking about riding horses and we talk about a skilled rider, again, the term professional rider means nothing. Amateur rider means nothing. It's a question of are you a good rider for your horse? And what do we need to be looking at from our horses that lets us know whether or not we have prepared them for ridden work? Again, all of the things that we look at when we see competitive horse racing, jumping. Oh, the horse loves to jump. Look at how this horse loves to run. And these are the lies we tell ourselves. They don't love to do anything like that. A horse's nature, if you look at the 5 domains, their ideal life would be out with their friends, having forage freedom and running around. What we need to do and look at it is the best we can hope for as we make what we ask them to do for us doable without causing them any pain, physically, mentally, or emotionally. That's it. If we can prepare them to do that, then we've done a good job. And we need to be happy with that if that's what we do. The other thing I find is that the culture tends to encourage us to set expectations that are far above the reality of what we can accomplish. Again, like learning to do all these things is time consuming. It's difficult, it's challenging. And even if we do everything right, there are still things that can go wrong. Horses are, after all, horses. I look at the things that I've learned, like a horse's natural asymmetry. It is at complete odds with what we want to do when we're riding them. We want them to be straight. We want to have even weight on all the feet. We want them to be doing things that are not necessary for them to do when they're just being horses. So trying to, again, shift the culture into, can we always start and be motivated by the fundamental love of our horses? If that's what we, assuming that you get a horse because you love horses. And if you don't love horses, then, frankly, I say do something else. If you want to win medals at a sport, then do something that doesn't involve a sentient being. Take up, I don't know, skiing, tennis, something else, because you're taking responsibility for the life of another sentient being. I mean, that's a huge responsibility. And I think it needs to be acknowledged and accepted that if you own horses, then that is what you need to be focused on.
To get back on the horse, grab my free mini course. It's packed with simple tips to help you overcome anxiety and get back on your horse again. Click the link below to download.
And so,
how can you change the expectation of a skilled rider? But you talk about skilled riders, and it's come to me like this, and I thought, yeah, a skilled rider. You always measure them in how many bands or things you have won in competition, but instead you should measure them by their contact with the horse. Can we change that?
We did. We had a conference. Yeah, we did a conference on that called a Skilled Rider Conference. I had talked with Sue Dyson, Mary Wallace, Gerd Heuschmann, and one of our Grand Prix dressage riders here locally, and we put together a conference. It's about an hour and a half long, and we went into the examination of skilled rider and what does it involve, what is considered skill from these different perspectives, because there are different perspectives of what skills need to come together in order to, again, keep these horses in a comfortable position while they're doing what we are asking them to do. And it also is important because, as I say, like from an Equitopia perspective, we are looking to change the global perception and the acceptance of protocols that go to explain all these and set the parameters by which we judge. And so it's as I say, it's a big undertaking, but it's also in the research field. When you're looking at research and we start breaking it down, we have statistical analysts that look at the research papers for us to kind of, I guess, translate some of the terminology that's not readily understandable, even by me, because I'm not a scientist, and certainly not for owners. So when you're designing research projects and you talk about the variables and you talk about the things that are measured, it sometimes seems like a foreign language. And so unless you do the analysis, you can't really extract whether it's good research or not. So when you have something, for example, that's a project and it's extracting data, for example, the rider's influence on the horse, and the description is that all these horses were ridden by a professional rider, then that right off the bat is a meaningless phrase, because what does that mean? So it means, is the data reliable? If you just have the thing professional rider, who picked the professional rider? What made them a professional rider? If they're not a good rider or a skilled rider, even though they're a professional, then doesn't that skew the data and skew the findings of the research project? So we have to get a little more, I guess, critical when we start looking at these things, which is part of what we do for Equitopia, is trying to extract as much as possible what these research projects actually looked like when they were being done, and how reliable is the data, and the findings and what they're saying. And, you know, it's a very interesting thing, because there is also the fact that research in of itself is never going to give you the black and white answer that every owner can take to the bank as to how they can do something. There is a level of instinct. There is obviously every individual horse, every individual rider is going to be unique in some way, that there's not a here's what you do. It's like, it depends. That is the answer that I frequently give to most people who have a problem that I can see what's going on. It's like, my horse does this, what do you think could be wrong? It's like, well, it depends. I don't know what's going on with your horse. This is the thing with owners, like the advantage to being to getting educated on all these things is that you can have better conversations. If you do end up having to call a vet because your horse is slightly off or having a little lameness problem, then you are the one that's going to have the most information that you can give to the vet to help them understand what might be happening. They come to see your horse, they're there for an hour. You have days and potentially years of information that, if you understand what it is you're seeing in your horse, what changes have occurred in the days up to this problem manifesting, then that is information that you can relay to the vet that might make a huge difference as to what they can actually find out, and if they can diagnose, or if they can figure out what's wrong. And again, not necessarily just a vet, it's also a trainer, or it's also the farrier. Like, you know what's happened to the lead up, whereas they're getting a snapshot. So, and it's also what I found is, you know, again, no matter what, and no matter who comes, the owners are still the ones that have the most information. So you still have to have an element of critical thinking to say, is what this vet or trainer told me, does it feel like it's the right answer or the right thing for what I know about my own horse? Because, you know, again, it's not that easy without the full picture, you know, because like if you're a human and you go to a doctor, you can talk to them and you can tell them, like, well, a couple of days ago I started getting headaches and and horses can't do that unless they have a translator, which is us. So we have to try and talk for them and do the best we can to represent what might be happening with them, good or bad, you know, and how do we recognize it? So it's a huge undertaking. I go back and forth with if I'm overwhelming people with what they really need to do in order to pursue what is, you know, probably a passion, because most people who do get horses, they love them, they're passionate about it. They're indoctrinated into the idea that it's all about the riding and competing. And I would love to shift that perception and go back to as I say, the fundamental joy of just having a horse and being around them, because that in itself is a marvel to me. And I've watched time and time again how that gets corrupted. I was at a clinic, I think it was maybe 3 years ago, and someone approached me. She was like the regional director of the pony club for the Western United States. And she came up to me and she said, I'm wondering if you can help with what's going on. And I said, what is going on? And she said, you know, I travel around to all these pony clubs, and these young children come in and they're all excited. They love their horses. They're so excited to be riding, and it's great to see. I come back 3 years later and those same children are all about, my horse isn't good enough. I need to kick them to go forward. I need to win. And their perception and they literally get manipulated into transforming that love and joy they had just being around horses into what the culture has dictated means success. You know, and this is again, like, it's tragic to me. And I see it happen all the time. If you look at even today, we try to keep an eye on what's happening globally. And a lot of the stuff in the competitive world is starting to look that way. There's hyperflexion in a lot of the top sports, and now we see young people doing the same thing. I just saw a few posts on some site where there's like 12-year-old children are now riding their horses around with their nose to their chests, and I see these pictures of them winning ribbons, and the noseband is tight as you like, and the flash as tight as you like, and you've got these 12-year-olds smiling because they're waving a ribbon. And again, like that's the other thing that to me is tragic for this, because then they forget the love of their horse, and that's what drew them to this in the first place. To see it get corrupted time and time and time again by the adults who focus on the wrong thing. And then those young children become those adults who keep the cycle going. So breaking it is definitely difficult.
Lost confidence in the saddle? I can help. My Get Back on the Horse program is designed to help you overcome fear and enjoy riding again. Let's get you back in the saddle with confidence. Click the link in description to join.
But on the plus side, not to sound all negative, I do see there's a shift coming. I think there are more and more people recognizing that what they love when they start thinking about it has become more of a chore, and has come to there's too much pressure, there's too much stress, there's too much competition that just makes it not joyful anymore. So hopefully more and more people can be willing to stand up and just say that, despite that it might be make them a little socially bit of a social pariah amongst their group. But it's like, find a new group. If someone is pressuring you to ride that horse, he's 2, you should be on him, or ride that horse, he's 3, you should be riding him, you should be showing him, or you should be doing this. It's like, have the courage to stand up for your horse and do something different. And that those kind of things and those actions, I think will have a knock-on effect, because I think what I'm talking about here with Equitopia and what you're promoting is still very much in a grassroots formation. I mean, it's spreading slowly. I think there's a lot of cognitive dissonance in the competitive sport world, where people are finding it hard to disconnect from what they probably realize somewhere in there is not as fantastic as they think, but it's a struggle to disconnect yourself from the culture. I think is what I'm saying is like, you need to pull the plug on that culture that takes the joy out of being around horses.
That's right. And you hear people, you have so nice horse, why aren't you competing? So it's all about that in the horse world.
Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with that. I've had conversations with psychologists. I've had various conversations to say, again, and this is our human element, like, and how we're set up. Like, people admire athletes. People watch the Olympics. They think, and they admire people who win medals, whether it's skiing or NASCAR or whatever. It's again, deeply embedded, where winning is something to be proud of. And it's not to say that it's not, but you can't admire winners without looking at the methods by which they win. Like, would you support someone who wins a marathon but they're juicing up on steroids every day? You differentiate that winning under those conditions is not the same as someone who's just worked hard, they don't do any of that stuff, and they've won. But then again, what does it mean about the people who came 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 5th? It doesn't diminish their good qualities, or that they're good runners, or that they're good skiers, or whatever they are. So I think, again, that all feeds into our I mean, this gets really into the deep stuff, like our feeling of self-worth. What makes things worthwhile? Like, what happens if winning at a competition is not the validation that we should be looking for? Where else do we seek the validation for being a good horse person? Can we not just be satisfied by having a happy horse? What other alternatives are there for, can we just switch to having maybe local competitions where we just go and have fun and we ride together, and yes, we get rewarded for the things we do right. Maybe it is a little ribbon, maybe it is something, but it's not all that and a bag of chips. It's like, you get a ribbon, it doesn't mean you lord it over the person who got 2nd or 3rd. It doesn't mean that. this is a reward for just being a good rider, and can we not be satisfied with that? And that's especially because we're talking about a sentient being. We're talking about, like, a bicycle doesn't care whether you win or not. If you throw a bicycle to the side, then maybe you're an angry person and you throw the bicycle to the side, but this is not the same thing as discarding a horse. You have a whole other being, and it's I don't think there is any other sport where we have this situation where you have a sentient being being basically the foundation of what it is we're doing. If there's no horses, there's no equestrian sport. And if we don't take care of them and make their welfare a priority, then what does that say about us as humans, as a race, as anything? I mean, I think it's a bigger reflection on, I'm going to bring in things like ethics and morality, but it does to some degree come down to that. What are we motivated by when we are living our lives? Because I think that sometimes then is reflected. How we treat our animals may be reflective of our moral and ethical standards. I mean, this can be controversial, I'm sure, for anyone listening, but isn't that not something what do we value in life? How do we go about, doing the right thing every day, for want of a better word? What is it that we're chasing? Why are we chasing it? Why has money become such a driving force in the competitive horse world? What does that do to attract the right people into the industry? This is what I see happening a lot of the time, is people are starting getting into this industry because of the money. So it's no longer, it slowly has transformed into, they're not getting into it for the love of horses, they're getting into it for the love of money, for the ego, for everything. When you have horses selling for a couple of hundreds of thousands, some of the race horses are selling for millions, some of the competitive horses are selling for millions. And then when you look at, like, some of the competition stuff, whether it's reining or dressage or show jumping, then they've also started looking at different things, like and again, this goes into a little bit of the political side, but with FEI sports, which is probably mostly in Europe, what people mostly do, like eventing, show jumping, FEI things. Then you have the relationship with the International Olympic Committee, where there's more money, and the path to the Olympics is only facilitated through the FEI. The International Olympic Committee are really looking for spectator sports where you can see something where spectators will get excited. So now you got all the flashing legs of the dressage horses, you got the jumps getting higher, you've got this, like, adrenaline thing, like it's car racing. That's what they want. And it's become completely corrupted. And they've changed the breeding as well. Don't get me started on breeding practices. People are breeding for trends now, not for function. So you have horses that are hypermobile. I imagine they're also hypersensitive. They're very difficult to ride and train. It's harmed their basic instincts to protect themselves, because the worst thing that a flight animal needs is to be hypersensitive to everything, because everything's a big deal then. Hypermobile doesn't help them. They have little or no stability. And the same thing happening in show jumping. And the idea of people wanting to almost see an accident in order to find something exciting when there's a horse involved, to me, is reprehensible. And I think it's easy to get caught up in that environment. You look at, again, what I consider people who should be role models who are not. And you have the music and you have the commentary, and you look at it and it's like, it's all false. I listen to the commentaries of some of these things, and it doesn't matter really, for the most part, what sport you're looking at. The commentaries are completely at odds with the reality of what's happening for these horses. And if you come from a place where you don't understand that, or you don't have prior knowledge or outside knowledge that allows you to see the difference between what people are saying and what's actually happening, then you become indoctrinated into that. You see what's happening and you believe the commentary, and that's what it starts to look like to you. Look at how well cared for this horse is. Look how excited this horse is. Look how harmonious this is. And people are like, oh, so that looks like harmony. That's what it looks like. And for those of us who know better, then it's like, this is not harmony. This is horse abuse. And so those are some of the conversations that are very, very difficult to have, because people, especially in the last 10 years or so, they may have only had exposure to those kind of commentaries and those kind of performances where they connect to and take it as truth. And I think this is why some of the very emotional back and forths. I don't know if you follow any of the social media. I mean, obviously we're on it every day because, you know, that's how a lot of people get information. But if you look at some of the discussions happening, it's very hard to keep things focused on evidence and research and not the emotions, because a lot of the things that come out on social media will be things like if you're a horse welfare advocate, and it does seem to me, people don't want to acknowledge this, but I do think it's become a little bit us versus them, because the conversations reflect that. It's equestrian sport or horse welfare instead of horse welfare as a central component of equestrian sport, which is what it should be. Why isn't it? Surely that should be what we all want. We want to be proud of equestrian sport, and the marker for judging that is the horse. Look how skilled you have to be in order to get a horse to do any of those things without compromising them physically, emotionally, or mentally. That is a skill to be admired if it can be accomplished. And it does take time, it does take patience, it does take persistence. And it, again, as I say, the horses that reach those pinnacles of jumping 6-foot fences and doing Grand Prix stuff and whatever it is they do, there's not very many horses, honestly, that are probably going to reach that level, because there's roadblocks along the way. And most of those riders who reach that, which, you know, the aspiring riders don't realize, is they go through many horses. They don't just get one horse, luckily, and that horse gets to that point, even if they do it right. So this is why, again, I think some of the changes, when riders aren't self-funded and they have rich sponsors, then you develop this attitude of, well, if this one doesn't work out, I'll just get rid of it and I'll get another one because my sponsor is going to give me $3 million this year. I'm going to win this competition by injecting my horse and getting him around, so I get, you know, another 500,000 to do this. And that's the culture that's seeped in. And you know, it's been glorified and celebrated and called accomplishment. And you know, I think we need to start questioning that in a very, very serious way, and take the rose-colored glasses off and start having the difficult conversations and start advocating for change. And that's one of the things that I talk about. Look, some of this is very heavy. Some of it is like, oh my God, would you please stop telling me all these things? But at the end of the day, we're in, you know, I suppose social license to operate is what's guiding a lot of these things. And it is a reality. You know, we live in an age where animal abuse is very much frowned upon by the general public. I don't think they have the same bias as people within the industry. They see it clearly. They see someone beating a horse. They don't ask why or in what circumstances. They're like, that's animal abuse, you know? And so as owners, if we want to keep horses being accepted by the general public, that we want to ride them, then advocating for them and being educated is a responsibility. It doesn't matter whether you never want to compete. I think as horse people, we have to rally around and start being involved in our industry and speaking up and going on social media platforms and talking about the reality and keeping these conversations honed and focused on horse welfare as a part of equestrian sport. These are non-negotiable things. It's never a choice between one or the other. It has to be both all the time, no matter again, whether you're an owner, whether you're a trainer, whether you're a farrier, whatever. We all need to start using our voices to demand that we adhere to these standards, because otherwise this affects us all. You know, we're not removed from social license to operate just because we don't abuse our horses. So, you know, that's kind of why I put this together, to address all those things. That's why the education platform focuses on all these things, so we can try to unite behind protocols, not behind anything else. The protocols that keep our horses safe and comfortable when doing what it is we ask of them. And that should be our responsibility, no matter who we are.
That's right. That's right. And if you are going to compete, it is a lot of pressure on your horse and to yourself as well. I have talked to many people who I help people who have been afraid of riding, and it is often a pressure from other people yeah, come on, he's so nice. Why don't you ride? Come on, get out and compete and show what you can. Otherwise, you're not a horse uh, equestrian. So
Yes.
we have to turn this around totally. And this is not a question about that we shouldn't ride our horses, but we should do it in the right way.
But it's very difficult. This is what I say when I go back to my original point of being a horse owner and going, I want to do the right thing for my horses. I don't want to compromise my horse welfare, the welfare of my horse in order to ride them. But that is very difficult because the industry is not prepared for people like us. Because if it's really more a question of luck. If you can find the right farrier, if you can find the right trainer, if you can find the right saddle fitter, the right person to help you and evaluate your posture, who's going to fit the bridle, who's going to do the teeth, and it's very challenging. And that's again why I say the only solution long term to this is we have to start adhering to protocols and putting pressure on. Like if you're an owner, and again, the advantage of being sufficiently educated enough is that if you call a saddle fitter and it's clear because of your level of knowledge that you can either tell whether they're a good saddle fitter or not, and I'll use those terms broadly because again they need to be defined. But if more and more owners start demanding better standards of professionals, and that's also the other way we change the industry. They need to get more educated, or they don't have clients. And then, like, all of those things are interconnected. We help each other up, and we demand better standards through education and through having these discussions that are based on something. And a lot of that also involves emotional regulation because we are all emotional creatures. And as I say, our currently held beliefs, depending on how deeply embedded they are very challenging. And people lash out. People are defensive when you start criticizing, no matter, whether it's good intention or not. Like, people always like to believe, or they would never want to believe, that they abuse their horse. Who wants to believe that? But I did. I abused my horse before I knew anything. It was unintentional. My horse has suffered because of my ignorance. And that's a terrible feeling. It's what drives me to be better. Was I offended sometimes with what people said? Did I offend people? Probably I did. But again, the thing is the horses have no choice in their life. And we are the only ones that they can rely on. They can't decide whether they come into the world or not. They can't decide who's going to own them. They can't decide who's going to be in charge of their health, their feet, the saddle fit, anything. They are completely and utterly dependent on someone else to advocate for them from their perspective. And so again, I feel for owners who love their horses, and those are a lot of the emails we get saying, I want to be this person for my horse, but I can't find anyone who is not telling me that I need to beat my horse, or that this is fine, or ignore that, and all the pressure, just make him do it, or get into the ring, or get on him, or do all these things. And as I say, it's grassroots. It's a slow thing, but one of the key things also that can help this change is again the willing to lower expectations. Are you willing to not ride your horse for now because you don't know how to do it right, because you're unsure, because your horse is telling you something? Can you just take a minute, take the time to get more education, take the time to find the like-minded people who'll be able to help you, and again, get the information that allows you to read your horse. And a lot of owners, if you love your horse, then you're probably the best person to do a lot of this yourself. Horses are very gentle, peace-loving creatures for the most part, unless you're dealing with a horse that had trauma, then it's a little more unraveling. But for the most part, you've probably seen on social media, there are people there who take horses that are completely unhandled, and through just developing the relationship and making them feel safe and having them be trusted, they can get on them bareback. Horses are willing to do that, and trust is the most important thing to them. And it's no different than if you're a human. Like, if you're in a scary situation, person with you is going to be a key element to how you react to being scared. If it's someone you trust and you feel they have the skills to advocate for you and protect you, you're going to feel a lot safer than with someone who you don't know, or who has harmed you in the past. You're going to be like, I'm on my own here, and I'm terrified because this person that I'm with is not going to be of any advantage at all if I'm in harm. And that's, you know, again, how horses learn, how they feel trust. But that really is the number one thing. You know, they feel safe. Feeling safe is number one. And I think a lot of people just, you know, they don't stop to think about that. Like what creates trust, what creates, you know, people focus on things like compliance and submission, and you know, a lot of horses end up in learned helplessness because, again, the theory of dominance-based training is still very much embedded. Even though it's been debunked through science, it's this idea of I in my head want my horse to do this. When my horse doesn't do it, then it means my horse is resisting, my horse is misbehaving, you know, and yeah, it's, as I say, it's like, it's time we change this. The other thing is we had a big argument, like, so positive reinforcement is hopefully something that's becoming more widespread and accepted. And there are many people who use food as a reward, because positive reinforcement is, you can do it without food, you can do a different reinforcer. But the resistance to people have to using food as a reward for horses it has been quite astounding. I've been unraveling that in the last several weeks, where like it's acceptable that you give a reward, a food reward to dogs for doing things. We use it in humans, like you see all the time, eat your dinner and you'll get an ice cream afterwards, or if you clean your room, you'll get this. And this is like, this works much better than if you don't clean your room, I'm going to spank the living daylights out of you or whatever. And this concept transfers over to horses. This is the same thing, but people feel like giving up, and again, it may be a bad experience. Obviously, food rewards can be used incorrectly, you know, but it is in their nature. Horses are seeking food 16 hours a day. It's what they do. So we have to, you know, that is one of their instincts that we can, again, like we're always manipulating horses, no matter which way we do it. But this is a way to make a positive experience for them instead of making a punishment, like the pressure or the aversive. I'm going to tie this horse up until he stands still. Instead of saying, why don't you stand still? For every 5 seconds I let you stand still, you get a treat. And how do you make that connection where they're like, okay, being tied up isn't so bad, and you know, you train the behavior without harming them. And that's the other, you know, one of the things that we start looking at is when we start unraveling the current culture, what resistance are we going to get to finding other ways? And that was one of the things that I thought, wow, this is going to be another challenge to overcome the resistance of people who want change and they want good horse welfare, but they have some kind of a hang up about the idea of using food as a reward when training. So that's one of the challenges that I'm trying to prepare for as things hopefully evolve into better protocols and understanding.
Hi, if you love horses and want to learn more about riding, training, and building a deeper bond, join my monthly membership. You'll get expert advice, live workshops, and a supportive community of horse lovers. Click the link in description to join. And sometimes it is what do you say? People have something in their head. I have always used food in to handle the horses, and I have said exactly as you. When our kids are behaving good, they got a piece of chocolate, and why not the horses? And I've talked to people. No, you shouldn't give your horses food when you are training them. You shouldn't. And I can understand that people they will get like, ooh, what should I do? Why can't I do like I feeling to do?
Well, timing is important, and someone brought up yesterday on one of the conversations I was having is, you know, it doesn't matter whether you use food, positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement, the timing has to be right. And so I think people, because using food as a reward is less understood, then people don't understand the timing. They have a better time understanding the aversive type stuff, but even then the timing is not great, or they misapply it. One of the things when it comes to like speaking with horses and cues and the timing and importance of it is it has to make sense to the horse. And I see, you know, a lot of people, I've seen this time and time again, where people, they may be learning to ride, they may be existing riders, but I'll see them pulling on the horse's face while putting the leg on. So they're giving a signal to go, but they're giving a signal to stop. Most of these horses, what are they going to do? You're telling them to go forward, you're stopping them in front. They rear up, they go up because they're like, I don't know what you want. You want me to go forward here, and you want me to stop here. So what am I supposed to do? And again, a lot of that is fear induced. This goes back to what you were talking about earlier, the taboo of talking about being afraid to ride. Why wouldn't we be afraid to ride? For heaven's sakes, we're getting on a 1,200-pound animal whose instinct is to flee, and we're getting on, again, like, what would you do if it was a lion? If someone said, hey, go out and ride that lion there, wouldn't you be terrified, or you want to know, what you probably wouldn't do it. But it is okay to talk about these things, and we should be afraid. And if we're not afraid getting on, then we shouldn't. People do die off horses. There are falls. And again, like the key thing is developing trust and not to go too far. And fear we actually did another conference on fear and safety, this connection between fear and safety, because this is nature. Like, this is a physical response. When a horse is scared, it's a physiological thing. It's not like they don't stop there and think, oh my God, I don't know what's going on. This is like an instinct. It's cortisol going to the brain in a thing, something responds. They when they're out in the wild and they're afraid, they're not going to stop and say, oh, is this a lion about to attack me, or is it a bag? Do I need to worry about it? They're like, I'm gone. That's it. And we as humans are not prepared for being on a horse when that happens, because people do fall off. And then it goes back to the idea of like, what makes that less of an issue both for the horse and rider? And people always go to control. They're like, I have to control this horse in order to not be afraid and in order to fall off. And it's the complete opposite of what we need to be doing. It's like, we need to give this horse confidence. We need to have confidence in ourselves and in the relationship of giving the horse a reason not to want to flee, of trusting you more than what they might be afraid of, because you've never put them in harm's way. And again, this is what gets dismissed. Get back on the horse, instead of saying, well, what happened that you fell off? Was it your imbalance? Was it some bigger? And we need to stop and figure out exactly, in most cases, why the fall happened. Was the horse bucking? If the horse was bucking and you fell off, then why was the horse bucking? What happened that this horse bucked? Was it a buck out of pain? Was it out of fear? Were they just feeling good for a minute? Or what was it, so that we have a better understanding of the circumstances about which you fall? And then the person is like, how are you feeling after the fall? If you don't want to get back on, you don't have to get back on, because again, like, people think that this is teaching the horse, and it's not teaching the horse. Horses, again, don't have that conniving, like, oh, I'm going to get this person off. Now, again, of course, people are going to say context is important. If a horse is feeling pain, and when they buck, the rider gets off, they falls off, then it gets them to some degree a relief of pain by getting the rider off. And if they do it again and it works to relieve the pain, then they will make that connection. And then it's up to the rider to look at that and not misconstrue it as this is a dangerous horse. And this is what happens, like with the fight or flight response. Then most horses, like probably 90% of horses, will submit. They'll go into like, I will go into learned helplessness because my voice is not being heard. I'm learning that no matter what negative experience I have no choice to help myself. And so I'm just going to ignore the negative experience and realize and come to terms with the fact that there's nothing I can do to help myself. And that's the learned helplessness. And this is, again, lack of interpretation. Like, I looked at something the other day, and it was this girl trying to train a horse to be hobble tied. I don't know if you know what hobbles are.
Yeah, I know.
You know what hobbles are? Tying the two front legs together. And she put the hobbles on, and this horse was bucking, and it was obviously, experiencing discomfort. And you could see the process happening where eventually the horse had this recognition of, there's nothing I can do to get out of this. And you had all these people commenting and talking about, look how the horse is figuring things out. They're learning. The horse didn't get injured. And there's all these things happening where they're like, well, this is the horse thinking and realizing that they have to stand still. And when you start looking at it again, you can shape things through. This is when I was talking about, if that's the only thing that people hear and they look at that, they can say, okay, that makes sense. You could realistically say, well, this horse has figured it out. And then on the other hand, you look at it through the lens of learned helplessness, and you can say, well, which one is happening here? what's the most likely thing, that's happening? Is this horse surrendering and giving up because they realize they can't get out of the situation? And it's not that they've learned something. What they've learned is that they have no choice in this situation, and there's nothing they can do to get themselves out of it. And so a lot of people can be shaped by the commentary that is being given by the person showing a video or whatever. And we have to be ultra careful to back it up with something alternate, to always be looking for, well, what makes this true? Is it true? What is this person? What is their credentials? What are they looking at? What would someone else say? If I went to an equine behavior consultant, would they agree with this commentary? Because again, as I say, the theory of dominance training is very much still embedded in the culture that we have. So, it is important. And when it goes back to the idea of, like, there are probably 90% of horses that will do this, and there are 10% who may potentially kill themselves in that situation, because they're like, I am never giving up. I am going to fight this until the death. And when it comes to riding horses that do that don't submit, and they have what are described as dangerous behaviors, is because they haven't been heard. They're the ones that will keep fighting. And these are the ones that end up going to trainers like, this is his last chance, this horse is dangerous, this is this, and this. It's like, they've made him that way. This is the horse who say, you will not quiet me down, you will not shut me up. And eventually some of them do get shut up, or they get sent off to, really not so good of an end. And, as we say, like, horses are their own worst enemy when it comes to interacting with us humans, because they are so inclined to just submit and not fight for their circumstances. So we need to be mindful also of that, of misinterpreting compliance and the bomb-proof horse, and the horse who can do anything, with the horse who's just said, I just have to put up with or whatever because my voice isn't being heard. And there's very clear characteristics with those horses. And again, we have to be careful about the terminology we use, and, as I say, how we evaluate the horses we see in front of us, which is not always easy. Like, what does learned helplessness look like? And there's a lot in the science of behavior that can help us with that. And of course, as always, I will say context is important. And so it's not, you can't always just judge in a moment, but we do have to be aware and constantly be vigilant, not to be lulled into a false sense of knowledge that is not the reality of what's happening for the horses.
That's right. That's right. And you have made a platform together with some other people, and I'm sure we put the link in the text. But tell us a little about that.
Okay, so as I said, when I looked at, what kind of a learning platform would I like to have access to back before, I did some of the things that make me feel guilty and my horses paid the price for. And that's what I set out with Equitopia. I wanted it to be affordable for everybody, was number one, because I know the economy is a thing. And horses are expensive, and I didn't want there to be any excuse for people not to want to have access to this information. And then it's like, how do we present it? Because again, the key to changing the current landscape is there has to be consensus. There has to be consensus. There has to be collaboration. If you're putting a team together, then to help with the horse, it's like you have to have some path forward where the vet and the trainer might be speaking from the same level of knowledge as the owner, and so that there's this true collaboration based on some evidence and research by which we evaluate what's going on with these horses and how we work together to solve it. Because it's rarely one of those things where the vet is going to have the answer completely. There's usually likely to be, say, well, say, for example, kissing spines. You have a horse with kissing spines. First of all, it's like you have to say, well, what is it, a genetic predisposition to kissing spines? Is it how the horse is being ridden? Is it the saddle fit? Is it the rider? What is it that has caused this kissing spine to come into existence? And then what do we have to do in order to, I'm not going to say reverse it, or what do we do to make this better? Because if it's a saddle fit, obviously we have to get a proper fitting saddle. If it's a training issue, we have to learn, the trainer has to be the one to learn how to understand how the horse needs to be ridden or brought back to work without causing the kissing spines to get worse or having the horse be unrideable. And so all those things have to be part of the equation. So we looked at contacting some of the, what we would consider the most experienced, the most highly credentialed people in the industry, and try to bring some of this information into a platform where owners could understand it, vets could participate and understand it because it's backed by the evidence and research. They can choose to read the papers if they want to, if they can understand them. The same thing with trainers and farriers. It's like, if we can all touch on and have a broad knowledge of what it is that we need to have in place in order to make this work for the horses, then we have a shot at getting more and more on the same page and having the same types of conversations and looking at the same types of protocols that we apply in these situations based on that whole horse, whole rider look at things. So yeah, so we put together, we do webinars. We do research revealed, where we take some of these papers and we break them down into language that's understandable by owners. We have some behind the scenes clips where some of our trainers will show pieces of a lesson, or we'll talk about, again, like, what does it look like when we get it right? Because we start breaking that down in terms of, well, theory is great, but we also have the visuals. So if you have like 3 different people and they're talking about riding behind the vertical is not a good thing, but then they show a video of a horse that is riding behind the vertical. And we've seen these happen. And so the question is, we have to have the theory and the visuals match, because otherwise you're trying to do a jigsaw puzzle without having the cover. It's like, what are we looking to accomplish here when we finish putting these pieces together? So we do some of that. And then we have some online courses with some of these various people that kind of take a deeper dive into the specific areas, whether it's biomechanics, rider posture, behavior, all these other things that you can do a deeper dive into. And again, the goal is, for owners, is to be able to have more elevated conversations with their professionals. And so if you have an owner that doesn't know any better and they go to a trainer that says, I can train your horse for you, it's going to be fantastic, I know my stuff, and the owner is like, well, how do I know if this trainer knows her stuff? We have to have that I guess, interview process where it's like, what does that mean? If I'm looking to be a good owner, I want to be a good rider, then how do I identify a trainer? So if you go and you see a trainer that's riding with draw reins and pulling their horse's neck to their chest, you need to know enough to say, well, if I love my horse and this is what I want to do, then this is not going to be the trainer for me. You have to know that in advance, because otherwise you're just going on their words. So that's the advantage for owners. And then for vets, it's to open up again, this bigger picture of when they're called out, like, how do we talk about cooperative care? Dr. Sue McDonald, she's a professor at Penn State University, and she's teaching veterinarians now how to understand horse behavior, and instead of putting stud chains on and holding horses down to do medical procedures, that we start working better with how they learn. We don't need to do all these things. When you start manhandling a horse to give them a veterinary procedure, then they're automatically going to be tense, because this is their nature. Oh my God, I'm being tied down, something bad is going to happen. So it's changing that mindset also with veterinarians for clinical stuff. And also, as I said, the understanding where it's like, okay, if you're called out and there's a problem and there's a behavioral issue, especially when it's related to ridden work, then we have to understand what we're seeing in the ridden horse. So anyway, those are the kind of things that we dive into to try and connect the dots, connect people, and move the industry forward towards understanding and applying these protocols, like from sharing the same hymn book, so to speak, that we're all singing from the same hymn book. We all understand what it is that we're looking to do, and we can understand the obstacles and the challenges and the situations that we go into that require solutions. So
that's fantastic. Yeah, we all are in the same page, I think, in this particular thing. And it's getting better and better, I'm sure about that. It feels like a lot is opening up now for the right thing to do. So it was so fantastic to hear all your opinions and things, and I'm so glad you were here today. Thank you so much for being here. And
Oh,
if
thank you. I hope
anybody,
I hope I didn't overwhelm people with all of my heated opinions. Well, then I don't want to say their opinions. Again, I try to say, look, we develop the evidence and research to help us along. It's really not just opinions. There may be a level of opinion at some point, but again, everything's not black and white. So at some point, the context has to be taken into consideration. And ultimately, as I say, we have to. The horses are the ultimate truth tellers. They don't lie. They can't lie. And so that's our anchor that keeps us on the same page. It's like, let's take a look at the horses. Let's understand what we're seeing. And there's no lies there. They're the ones that are our ultimate answer and guide.
that's right. And it is all about the horses, that they have a good life. So
Yes,
thank you so
indeed.
much for being here today. And thank you
Thank
to
you.
all of you who have been listening and watching this podcast. And please remember to uh, sign up for this podcast, because it will help me to find more people like Caroline here today. And have a good week. Thank you so much.